The Goat House is back with brutally honest free agency grades and takeaways for every single NFL team, who won, who lost free agency. Not always about who got all the best players, who missed out on players. There are more factors than that. Let's break it down. Unfortunately, a very tough outing for the Raiders in free agency. For several reasons, they were disappointing. And the roster as a whole got worse. Quarterback, maybe a different story. They got better there. That's pre-free agency. We'll circle back to that. But you look at throughout this roster, they went backwards. And there's only a few teams that did that. And for an example, the Eagles are one, but they had a legitimate excuse. The roster's already loaded. They couldn't afford a lot of these guys to bring all of them back. They had to pick and choose. The Raiders, second most cap space this year. If you combine this year and the future, they're in the best situation. Does that mean go spend all of it? No. So I understand not overspending. They did the complete opposite. I know it's a weaker free agency class, but there are strong players that you can go for. You have your own players that you needed back. And not only do they not get those guys back, but in the act that they really suffer in a lot of positions. I mean, Trevon Moehrig, underwhelming most of his young career until last year. They put him in the right spot, breaks out, looks like a future star, one of the youngest players in free agency. Go get that guy back. You need to get that guy back. They let him go. I know he's expensive, but what are you here to do? Just let your good players walk and at the same time not get another good player, not get more good players when you are set financially? It doesn't make sense. Robert Spillane's been awesome for them. Nate Hobbs has been more important than people think. He's played outside, inside. Those guys weren't overly expensive, and they patched these holes up with guys that are maybe going to be good. They're rentals. Like, I like Malcolm Kuntz signing, bringing him back. It's a rental. It's kind of a wait and see. It's a one-year thing. So I do not love what they did. Again, it doesn't mean go overspend because you have a lot of money, but it doesn't mean do the complete opposite. And then you factor in Geno Smith. Wasn't a free agency addition. It was a trade. They got better at quarterback, but he's a veteran quarterback that they're putting chips in on Geno Smith right now. It's to make your team better right now, but around him, every single spot almost either stayed the same or got worse because what you did in free agency. So it's contradicting. It doesn't make much sense. It's a team that had the ability to take a step up. You didn't need to take a major step up. You didn't need to go spend hundreds of millions of dollars and overpay everybody. You didn't need to do that. They did the complete opposite. So I'm not a fan at all of what the Raiders did. It didn't make a ton of sense. I guess the part that does make sense, they are set for the future with, financially, if they use it. To me, what does this tell me what they did? They think they're a future team. They don't think they're a team right now. They're not putting any chips in right, except at quarterback. That's why it's a little contradicting. So I know a lot of fans got to be disappointed because there's no way you thought this would be a good free agency with the money they had and the guys they wanted back. So extremely disappointing from the Raiders, but it'll be very important next year for them to do something. And they got stud players on their roster, so they had an opportunity. They had a really solid opportunity. I think staying the same about with free agents would have been fine because you got better at quarterback with Geno, but they did the opposite of that. So there's some signings I don't hate. Like Chin's not a bad signing, but you kind of go backwards from Moehrig. Alex Kappa, arguably was the worst guard in football last year. I think that's a sneaky one, though, but I just don't like what the Raiders did here. Cincinnati Bengals, another team with a brutal outing, very disorganized, but there's more reasons I didn't like their free agency as well. But backtrack, before free agency, I had a load of Bengals fans getting pissed at me, calling a hater for not giving them all these top free agents. But me, I'm going, they're not a team that makes splash moves, and they're so focused on their own guys right now, they still don't have them locked up. So I think those fans got to be upset. They're going to have to give the Bengals an F as well because they thought they were getting all these big-time free agents, and they did the opposite of that. They didn't necessarily need to go out and get big-time free agents for me to give them a good grade. They're very disorganized, one, because they're just still so focused and have no plan really for Jamar Chase, who's under contract, needs an extension. T. Higgins, they have him. He has the franchise tag, but they have no idea if they're paying that tag this year or if they give him a new deal right now. Trey Hendrickson, they don't know if they're trading him or not. They need to solve at least some of this way before free agency. They were unable to focus on free agency because of that. So there is a little bit of an excuse in there, but I think they got to get more organized. They had an opportunity to get better. They needed to get better. Interior defensive line, maybe interior offensive line, maybe cornerback. They needed to get better here, and they were unable to focus on that because of their mistakes. They're, being stubborn, not being able to jump on things as early as they're supposed to. And then on top of that, I mean, that's all you hear about. They need to get better at D-tackle. They can't stop the run. There's no interior pressure. Right away, they signed B.J. Hill to probably more than he's worth. So, all right, I guess they're staying the same. The only thing they add is T.J. Slayton from Green Bay. It's probably a rotation guy. Nothing, they're staying the same, basically. I like the Gesicki extension. I don't mind that one. It's not great. Burks could be a little sneaky, but I don't know. The Bengals just so focused on their own guys that they just did not have a plan early enough, and they just really they don't know. They don't know how much they're going to be paying now in the future, and they had cap space to work with. So, not a fan of the Bengals because, again, disorganized is the word I want to use for them, and they kind of just trying to stay the same and not really get better when they're a team that has the chance to be a serious contender if they do it right, and they certainly did not do it right. Falcons get a little bit better of a grade than those last two teams. They get an F+. They have an excuse compared to the Raiders and the Bengals of they didn't have much cap space at all. They had ways, kind of being stubborn with the Kirk Cousins situation. I kind of understand that one in a way, but they cut Grady Jarrett, maybe a little bit of a surprise cut to some people. They actually freed a lot of money with that. And what did they do with that? They didn't really do anything. These are their additions here. Didn't really do much with the chance that they had. And another thing as well, they lose Drew Dalman, which is fine. I'm not going to penalize them too much, at all, really, for losing Drew Dalman. I'm not a big fan of paying centers huge money, but they're in line to get maybe a decent compensatory pick next year for losing a player that got paid a lot of money. But that Divine Diablo signing, actually right now in terms of the projections, canceled that one out. So maybe they do not get a pick for the Dalman loss. And Diablo, I think he got overpaid. He's a decent at best linebacker. I know they really wanted Jamie Sherwood. He got taken off the market beforehand. So the Falcons are a team that I thought, and they have a lot of future cap. So they're acting like, I know that this year they don't have a lot of cap, but they're acting like they can't do anything right now. So not really thrilled, and that's really not the case. And I'm not really thrilled with what they've done. I thought they could have got a little better off the edge. Now you take away Jarrett. I know he's been declining, but you're a little worse in the interior defensive line, as well. Don't really love some of the things that they've done, bringing Mike Hughes back for that. I like Kadero Hodge. He's actually a little bit more important player than people think, but I thought they could have done a little bit more damage again. What did you cut Grady Jarrett for? Where did that help you to do this? So some question marks there for Atlanta. I thought they could have got used a little bit of that future cap and done a little bit to improve. 49ers, I'm going to give a D- to. Part of me is like, yeah, they're loading up on draft picks, compensatory picks by letting guys go that they feel like they don't need, or some of these guys have durability concerns, and they're loading up on more. They already have a bunch of picks this year. They're going to build through the draft. And part of me is like, I love that. I love building through the draft. That's my thing. But this is that one team I wish they kind of would have went not all out, but close to that, because they actually have space this year. They're a little locked up in the future. They got to, extend Brock Purdy. I understand those things, but this team is on the brink of being a Super Bowl champion, in my opinion. They finally had some cap space this year. They could have used that just to better some positions. You didn't need to go crazy, and I feel like they did the opposite of that. So I thought there was a big opportunity. I was almost predicting that I would predict the Niners to be a Super Bowl favorite, from the NFC. And they didn't get me there. They didn't get me there what they did here. So they are focusing on the future a little bit more. I do love draft picks. They're adding, draft picks, by gaining compensatory picks. They're not bringing back old injured players for high price. I like that. I just think they could have done a little bit more damage here. Not a lot of notable additions, which, just give me one. Just give me one big addition that's gonna make the Niners more of a contender. They had the ability to do that. They didn't do it. So that's what I that's crushing me here with the 49ers in their free agency. Cowboys are an interesting one. They get a D+. They're interesting because, they get Odigizua back. That's pretty big. They gave him a lot of money, but the D tackles are getting a lot of money. I like the Javonte Williams signing, 1 year, $3 million. It's just a rental. We can't go crazy about that, but I think he's going to play very well for them. Will Dante Fowler play as well as he did last year? It's the rest of these are pretty small signings, right? All of them are small signings. And it doesn't look that bad at first if you just look at it like that. But My thing is the Cowboys restructured a bunch of money, which means they clear space now, and everything that all the amount of money that's cleared now, they throw it into future years. So the more cap charges future year to clear space now. That tells me they want to use that space now. They actually, for a change, want to get better. Like, not just better. They want to get better. And they didn't do that. So they're just looking to have that money most of that money roll over. I think it backfired. I think they planned to do a lot more than they did. And that's the only explanation. And it backfired. And there, again, some signings that's good. They got Odigizua back. They got Turpin back. Javonte, again, Javonte Williams is a rental, can't get too crazy, but I do like that signing. It's just, what did you plan to do? I don't think what they planned to do, I don't think it actually happened here. So a little bit of a backfire, and they are focused on Micah Parsons, his extension. That's going to take future money where you loaded into, remember you loaded restructure money into the future. So a little contradicting there. I think the only way that made sense is if they went out and they got, a big-time receiver, a big-time offensive lineman, a big-time corner. Instead of they're trading for guys that might be decent for them that really haven't, but they've been busts so far. So the more I talk about it, the more angry I get. But again, there are some decent signings. It was good they got a couple guys back, but it just doesn't make a ton of sense, so I gave them a D+. Eagles get a C- for me, and most people will probably want to, and that'll be the difference between most people's grading system and mine, which I'm doing it the right way. Most people will say, Eagles get an F. They got worse. They lost all their best players. I factor in the team's financial status. Is it actually realistic for them to keep these super expensive good players? And no, the Eagles didn't have the financial status of the Raiders or even the Bengals. They didn't have that because they're a loaded roster and they pay really good players, and they brought Bond back. They Barkley wasn't a free agent. They adjusted his contract, so that's besides the point here. They just could not afford a lot of those players, so you kind of give them a pass, but we still have to grade them based on what they did. I think they went a little overboard, though, so I'm not giving them an F, but I really don't love it. I think they went a little overboard in terms of letting a lot of players go. Thought they could have got back somebody. Did they have to trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson, even though it's a trade? It's not technically free agency. They always find a way to add a big player still. But they were a little tight on cap now and very much for the future, so they did have to be very careful. They're also loading up on future compensatory picks by, letting a lot of these guys leave, and they besides receiver, they do a very good job of drafting. So that's a good thing as well. It's just hard to give it any better of a grade than this because they lost a lot. They went a little overboard with losing some guys. They're going to trade Goddard now, too. We'll see. I don't want to make any assumptions. And I like A.J. Dillon. I think it's a little sneaky, but they got Bond back. They kind of paid a lot for him, but it just feels like a C-. But it's not all about who you lose, who you get always. Be realistic. What was the team's financial status? What were some other factors there? So we're not going to punish them as much as some may. The Cleveland Browns, very quiet free agency, and people will go, quiet, didn't add anyone that good? F. That's not how things are supposed to work. Look at their financial status. Look at where they were at. Bad situation, right? We're not going to grade their situation. It's bad. It's all because of the Deshaun Watson contract. But so what they couldn't come in here and do is overspend and use the future money that you had. They had to be careful. And they came in. They were actually able to keep some of the good offensive linemen together because they didn't want to open up new holes that they couldn't afford to open up. They didn't want to do that. So I thought, going in there, not overspending was kind of the key for the Cleveland Browns. And the only thing I didn't like, because they probably could have got a better grade, honestly, because they were on path of what I needed them to do, and that's not overspending. But I don't know if I love cutting Dalvin Tomlinson and signing Collins to like around the same amount or what they cleared from Dalvin Tomlinson. I don't know if was that a necessary move. It's either keep Tomlinson or cut him and just save the money. They kind of went and spent the money there. So, yeah, nothing sexy about this at all, but that's really not what it's about. We're not grading who had the sexiest time in free agency. That sounds ridiculous, but I give them a C. The Seattle Seahawks were a little all over the place here. I mean, first off, the Geno Smith trade is a trade. It's not free agency, but by the way, I did like that. I did a trade grades video. I did like that one, but bringing Sam Darnold in for much cheaper than you. I mean, he went for the appropriate price. They didn't get a steal, but he went cheaper than what we thought he was going to go for. Remember, they got a third for their quarterback, and they got Sam Darnold. I love that flip. I love that. So we're starting off at a very high grade, actually, for the Seattle Seahawks. But, yeah, again, you're taking away players. You're not really adding. Specifically their interior offense line was brutal. Absolutely brutal. Did nothing to it. They missed out a bunch of guys. Taking receivers away. Cooper Kupp, I don't hate the signing. I don't love the signing. I didn't expect him to get that type of contract. You're loading up on slot receivers. They're just gearing up to run the football under Clint Kubiak. That's what they're doing. But then I don't think they spent in the right spot, really, if that's the case. DeMarcus Lawrence was very confusing. I mean, a guy that's always injured, a guy that's 33 years old. What is he going to do for you? So MVS, I mean, it's a cheap thing, but I mean, Josh Jones going to start for you? And Ernest Jones, I was surprised with the contract he got. He's coming off an injury. Other teams just didn't want him. I don't think he was going to have as much of a market as the Seattle Seahawks thought if he got to free agency. That would have been a guy you let get to free agency and then sign him based off how other teams are paying. I think they overpaid. Not that it's a ridiculous amount, but other teams are getting rid of him. Nobody wants him. When teams are trying to trade him for a decent cost, nobody was going to give him a high amount of money. So coming off an injury, especially, decent player. He was really good for the Seahawks, but understand the situation. So they're a little all over the place. Like, one second, like, they're rebuilding. Wait a minute, they're not. Oh, wait. They're getting these old veteran guys on top of not shoring up, like getting better in important spots. The more I talk about it, the more frustrated I get. But there are some good things in there. Like again, I'm not saying the Cooper Kupp signing's bad. It's decent. It's a kind of a boom or bust. Like it's gonna end up being like really good or really bad. I feel like, but again, getting Darnold for $33.5 million and getting a third from Geno on top of that looks pretty good. The more I talk, the more frustrated I get. So C was kind of the top of the line of what I was going to give them. A little all over the place is the best way. Each of these teams, I kind of have a summary of how it is going. A little all over the place. Not really sure what the plan is for the Seattle Seahawks. Commanders get a C for free agency. Their offseason is held up by a couple trades. They got rid of a lot of draft picks. They drafted so well last year, so we can sit here and argue that, but it's a free agency video. But their offseason is being held up by a couple trades where they made the offense better. Offense line with Tunsil and then receiver with Debo, as long as those guys are healthy and still capable of playing their games. Offense is better. Offense was already really good. Of course, you needed to get help there. For Jaden Daniels, their prized possession, but the defense was the issue for many reasons, but specifically run defense. To me, the defense, I think, might have got worse. Coming in the free agency, they were supposed to add a big-time corner. They were, at worst, going to stay the same at safety with Martin, who was already going to be on the roster, and Jeremy Chin, but there was talks of, we'll get Jeremy Chin back, and then we'll upgrade that free safety spot. Didn't do that. They even lost Chin. They kind of downgraded in that area. Will Harris, former corner turned safety, kind of feels like a depth guy. Jonathan Jones is a pretty decent fit. Man coverage guy, definitely declining. He can play inside and out. I know they do have Saintsville, can do the same thing. You lose Jonathan Allen, you cut him, and you sign Kinlaw. I was surprised about the amount of money Kinlaw getting. Not a good run defender. To me, they at best stayed the same in terms of run defense. So I kind of a random free agency for them. I think they're kind of focused on trades too much with the trades that they've done, and they're in on Trey Hendrickson. So if they miss on him, they're going to be like, shit, we should have signed one of those big pass rushers. But if you do get him, you traded even more picks. And yeah, a team like that needs some draft picks, right? And they still have some. But Dietrich Wise could be a little sneaky. Again, I didn't love the Kinlaw signing. So I don't know. It's kind of a weird route. They're really just built on the trades and making the offense a little bit better. Maybe a little bit more than a little bit better, but it's kind of two pieces there. While the defense, I would actually argue, no one's really talking about it, I would actually argue it's worse. And the expectations were big-time corner, safety probably gets a lot better, big-time run defender. None of that existed. Did not exist here with a team that has a lot of cap space right now in the future. And again, that doesn't mean I need them to go out and spend a shit ton of money. And they actually did, looking at the trades. But I don't need them to go that crazy. You could have done a little better, I thought. So this was an interesting route here in free agency, almost making the defense worse. Texans are much like the Commanders in terms of it. Their offseason's kind of built on trades, and I did like the trades for the Texans, but kind of looking at their free agency, a lot of random small signings, guys that are probably just depth. That's kind of a longer list than what the guys we got, the notable guys we have listed here. But I like getting Rankins back, but offensive line kind of took a brutal hit. So at the same time, I mean, you get a D tackle, you get, again, a lot of this is made up of trades here. Their offseason. Kirk, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, things like that. The offensive line was supposed to be their focus. It seems to be the opposite right now. So I thought they could have done a little bit more damage with some of those guards in free agency. But it's weird. I've kind of liked what they've done with the trades, honestly. But free agency's been pretty. It kind of takes me back a few years ago. The Texans were kind of rebuilding some of these signings. That's kind of what it feels like. So kind of in the middle here with the Texans. They're a tough team to grade. Basing it off of free agency. I mean, you do have to factor in the trades a little bit because they don't need those positions anymore in terms of signing. They're kind of building around that, but interesting offseason so far to say the least for Houston. Saints are kind of like the Browns. They're a really tough situation, financially, obviously, so they needed to come in here and not spend a crazy amount. They spent a little bit, but not spend a crazy amount of money. There's going to be an opening of cap space in the future. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. They did a decent job. I think they overpaid Chase Young. I still think he has a talent in him, but I don't know where they got that contract. I love the Justin Reed signing. Where is that going to get him? I don't know, but that was a really good contract, a really good signing. And Juwan Johnson's still young. They like him. Get him back. Why not? Just because you're a little thin on space doesn't mean you can't get some of your guys back. That kind of goes back to the Raiders and what they did. They had so much space. They let their guys walk. They don't add anybody good. It's like, you want to keep your good players, and if you don't, you got to get some other good players. So I just can't get over what the Raiders did, in free agency. But Saints, again, maybe overpaid Chase Young a little bit, and never was going to be a super good free agency, but either they did a decent job for what they kind of had going for them. Jets get a C+. For one, I'm not a huge Justin Fields guy, so I wasn't in love with that. And with that contract, too, it's like the Jets, you're paying him $20 million. You don't do that to be the backup, but they give him a 2-year deal because they're not really sure if he's going to be the guy or not. So I thought it was maybe a tiny bit contradicting there, but they should be able to run the piss out of the ball pretty well, I suppose. And then, got worse at receiver, kind of had to move on from Adams, didn't really get a replacement. I like the Cisco signing. It's just nothing that we can go too crazy about. It's a 1-year thing. We're going to be doing the same thing with Cisco next year, so can't make it too much big deal. They add a center. I haven't really been a Myers fan, but they add a center. Brandon Stevens could be pretty sneaky. They add him. They lose DJ Reed. So what they lost actually might look more significant what they gained. It was a lot of guys they kind of had to move on from. Stone Smart could be a little sneaky. They wanted Sherwood back. I always wonder about linebackers, though, switching schemes or coaching staff. So it's a big to-be-determined free agency class. Again, there's some signings that I like. They did lose a lot, but they gained some things here. The more I talk about it, it's C+ is probably that top of the line I was going to give them. It's a C+ range here for the Jets. Miami Dolphins, I give them a C+. Maybe they're not too far from being a B-. I do love the James Daniels signing. They upgraded the guard position. They didn't pay a ton for them. Nick Westbrook-Akine is kind of a sleeper receiver. I thought it was a pretty decent deal. I mean, how much better? KJ Britt's pretty decent. How much better do they get? They clear a lot of space this year. They're not in the best financial situation. I really don't know how they ended up with that, though. It's just, again, not a super sexy free agency, but some decent signings. Thought they could have done a little bit more damage at the offense. I mean, they still have, even with this, they still have openings at the offensive line. They're still a little beat up on the defensive line. Need some guys there. Again, they probably need another corner still. They added a few safeties, but does it actually make them a ton better with those guys? So still some openings, still some questions. Again, none of them are big signings, but they're signings I kind of like, but it still kind of makes you wonder, do they still need that? So that's where I'm at with Miami. The Jags had an interesting free agency. They got a long list of players, and at first glance, you get that many players, and some of them are notable names, no big names, and you go, oh, the Jags improved big time. But then you go, wait a second. And I love some of these signings. I like Robert Hainsey. I think he's underrated. The value on that, him and Macari, pretty solid. But Hainsey's replacing Mitch Morse. Macari's replacing Brandon Scherf. Jordan Lewis is replacing Jerry Jones, who I liked in the slot. Could he play outside? We'll see if he could do it. But then you got Eric Murray in, Andre Cisco out, De'Ami Brown in, Christian Kirk out. So if you really look at it, they needed these players at the end of the day because they ended up being holes, but they didn't actually improve on paper, I think they will because the coaching, but on paper, they did not improve with these signings technically. And they were supposed to go big at corner. They were in on this guy, that guy, that guy. Same thing with safety. They were looking to spend, and it was very underwhelming. Did I need them to spend big money to have a good offseason? Not necessarily. And that's the thing. They actually spent. You wouldn't really know it by these names, but they actually spent a bit. So it's like, yeah, they patched up some holes that were made holes with some fits. Not the biggest transformation here. Thought they could have done a little better, in the secondary. So it's definitely a little random. It's an interesting free agency for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Steelers offseason's kind of held up on the DK trade, grading free agency. Yeah, I think we're kind of waiting on that quarterback decision, so it could backfire on them. You thought they, since they have actually a good amount of cap space now in the future, doesn't mean spend all of it right now, but you thought maybe they would be able to do a little bit more damage to take that step up from just a borderline playoff team to something a little bit more, like add a little bit more at D-tackle. I mean, I like how they shored up things at corner, add Slay and Eccles. I like they kind of doubled down to pair with Joey Porter Jr. That's not bad. Again, thought they'd do a little bit more on the defensive line. Adding DK is big for them. Not that there was a free agency signing. It's kind of incomplete right now because we're waiting on that quarterback decision. But in terms of free agency, again, I thought they could have done a little bit more damage, but in no way is it bad. And running back's a question too. Technically, they got worse at running back, but I do like Jalen Warren with Gainwell. Do they add something there? So it's a very much incomplete team still, but I'd put it at a B- right now. Buffalo Bills get a B-. Maybe not the most appealing addition of players, but you kind of had to understand their financial situation, which some of their fans were kind of telling me, like, oh, they're going to clear space. They're going to get this big free agent. They're going to get this big free agent. They're going to trade for this big-time guy. So I would assume those fans are giving it an F unless they change their mind. But you have to be realistic about the Buffalo Bills. They had limited cap space this year, but they gave out a bunch of extensions that had nothing to do with free agents, their own free agents. They were guys that were under contract. And what did that do? It opened up space this year. I think they restructured Oliver as well, but that loaded up cap charges in the future. So it kind of limited their future. So that resulted in a bunch of one-year deals. So can't go too crazy over one-year deals. Joey Bosa, I like the fit. I think he could play very well for the Buffalo Bills. They didn't pay a lot for him. At first, like right away when that happened, I'm like, that's a big-time signing. And then I started to calm down a little bit because it was pretty big for the Bills to go out and get a consistent pass rusher because that kind of was a big reason they were kind of getting stopped short. And they get a guy that could be very good for them, really good fit, but it's also a guy with durability concerns. And if he is out, then it's going, well, that was it. That was like our big pass rush addition. So that's kind of the tough part. I still really like it. Josh Palmer, not the best receiver in the world, but he could play well for Buffalo. Forrest, decent safety. They needed to get better at safety. Dane Jackson's back. I know a lot of people wanted him gone before he left, and now he's back, and they need more of an answer at corner. And then you got a couple guys that are going to be suspended for 4 to 6 games. That's pretty tough. I didn't get the Michael Hoyt contract either. Didn't love that. The more I'm talking about it, maybe the B- is the top of the line. I did like some of the signings that just how much of an impact are they now in long term. But again, they're not one of those teams that had a lot of money to spend and they didn't really do enough. They did some things while not really having a ton of wiggle room, because it's not just about how much money you free now. You have to factor in the money in the future as well. And they added cap hits in the future. So a lot of people were saying they're going to get this big-time receiver, that big-time, this defensive end. It's just unrealistic. But if you said that was what they were going to do, then maybe you don't think it's a good free agency. But a B- makes a lot of sense for them. Maybe they're close to being a C+, but I think a B- is where I feel good with the Bills. The Tennessee Titans started off very slow. They've been kind of kicking in the gear very recently. And they started with, a splash signing in Dan Moore, who it seems like an overpay, obviously, but he helps them at the left tackle spot. They upgrade there, and it moves J.C. Latham, who actually played well as a rookie, but to his correct alignment at right tackle. And then it's very slow, and I'm like, I'm not liking that. Titans might be a loser free agency, but then they add Kevin Zeitler, who not going to be around long term, but man, their offensive line, if you look at it now compared to where it was last year, it actually should be a bit better. And Draymond Jones was a sneaky guy that was cut. Won't count in terms of the compensatory formula because he was cut. Can play multiple alignments there. Xavier Woods, yeah, you wish they could have done better there. I didn't like how they handled the receiver position. That kind of what bumps them down, even though they improved the offensive line. They got some signings here, but the receiver position kind of bumps them down to a B- because they need a lot still. And apparently Nick Westbrook-Akine had the same offer or around the same offer from the Titans that he did with the Dolphins. He chose to leave, so that's really not ideal. Could they offer him a little bit more? I thought he played very well for them last year. 9 touchdowns, kind of went in Minnesota game against that defense, went off, had some games like that. So, and that was a new system last year. So I thought they needed him back, and he went for cheap. So didn't love how they handled the receiver position, but I think they're gearing up what I said before free agency. They're going to take Cam Ward, I think, or they're going to take a quarterback at least, and they're gearing up to make sure offensive line is more complete. It was not complete last year. It's more complete, and even though they paid Dan Moore a lot, they improve it, and they move Latham to the right spot, which improves it even further, in my opinion. You get a veteran guy in there, too, to help you, almost mentor these guys up, so kind of a free agency class that's grown on me a little bit as they start to kind of kick into gear later in free agency here. Broncos with a big-time boom or bust free agency. I mean, how much boom, I guess, though. But a lot of risk in this, because of durability concerns. But they got good players as long as they are healthy, as long as they are the same post-injury. And some of those guys, as long as they're as good, away from that Niners defense, the Broncos have very well-coached defense, so I could see it. I mean, they got good players here. But the Broncos are very interesting, though, because they were for sure in on Zach Bond. Boom, he's taken off the board. Then it was Nick Bolton. They were going to be in on him. Taken off the board. I heard maybe Sherwood if he was available. So they're really looking for the linebackers. Trey Greenlaw was kind of down the list there. They were in on Aaron Jones, taken off the board. Juwan Johnson, Saints get him. Thought I would like Keenan Allen for them. We'll see. He's still available. The fans really wanted Cooper Kupp taken off the board. So I think a lot of the fans, like the guys they wanted, they didn't get. They got some guys, good players with durability concerns. So maybe they aren't too happy. But at the same time, I know fans were kind of getting on me for not loving. Like, it's funny when someone gets mad at someone for not loving some signings. But just a lot of risk here. But not that I never said they were bad. But yeah, with Hufanga, again, good player if he's out there. As long as he's the same player post-injury, I'm being pretty optimistic because he's still pretty young. Greenlaw, I didn't love that one just because there's been so many injuries. He was definitely declining a little bit. He just didn't seem right. Maybe he hurt himself more coming back too soon at the end of last year. The Niners kind of knew that, so I was surprised at the contract he got. So really risky with these guys. And then Evan Engram, he's had past injuries as well, but I like that. That one helped it overall. I like that one. Should be a weapon in Sean Payton's offense. At the same time, there is a knock on it. $12.5 million per year when you still kind of need another tight end that can block for you. So it is a lot of money there. But overall, these are, in Sherfield's a small one. Overall, these are solid players. It's just fast forward, is there much availability for... they spent a bit of money on this. So it is extremely risky, and they kind of missed on the option A's and even option B's. It's a fact. They're trying to be in on those ones. So it's not a free agency class you can kind of go crazy on. It's a little smaller and a lot of risk to it, but they're good players. They're good players as long as they're right, as long as they're okay. That's the thing there. So this is definitely one we really got to watch during the year. The Chargers get a B-, another very interesting team because there's a couple single signings here that I love. I love bringing Najee Harrison for what I think he's going to be great. I think he's underrated. I think he's going to be great for the Chargers. It was a 1-year deal, so it's kind of just for this year as of now. Mekhi Becton, it was a very recent one, 2-year, $20 million. I think that's great. He's an absolute perfect scheme fit. Play that right guard spot, can play tackle if someone goes down. I love it. That might be an A+ signing right there. So there's a couple I love. You can't go too crazy over the 1-year deals. It doesn't impact the future. But love those. But at the same time, yeah, a lot of other. I do like that they added some corners because they drafted pretty well there, but they needed other experienced guys just in case. They didn't overspend there. I like that. It's pretty fun bringing Mike Williams back. They need to do better at that receiver. They had a lot of spending money now in the future. That was like a rare situation. You have Justin Herbert, who has a big contract, big-time quarterback, big contract, and you have a ton of space now in the future with a pretty good roster already. Boom, you got to strike when you have that. You got to strike, and they didn't really do that. And they did it with a couple good signings, but still a big question at receiver, tight end. I like the Becton signing for the offensive line. For defense, Poona Ford was big for them. Losing Poona Ford for that price, don't love that. I don't. You needed Khalil Mack back at the end of the day because you didn't want to have another hole at the edge position. But $18 million for 1 year for a 34-year-old that's definitely declining as durability concerns. All of it guaranteed. If he gets hurt at any point, it's like you just threw $18 million out the window, and you had more money to spend on other spots that were for players that could have been long-term solutions. You didn't do it, so there's a chance that backfires big time. So we're a little all over the place here with the Chargers. Again, a couple signings I really like. They could really help them, but I think they could have done a little bit more damage. There's some questionable spots here. So they're a very interesting one, to say the least. But, they drafted so well last year. Keep going with the draft. Again, a perfect world. Just another big player or two or a decent player or two in the right spot. Spend a little bit more. Don't be so stubborn. A little stubborn when it comes to making a splash move, it kind of feels like right now. So B- feels like it's a appropriate grade for the Chargers. Chiefs free agency's really grown on me. The more and more I think about it, it's actually close to being a B, and it might not look super appealing, but they had a lot of their own guys they had to get back. And just think, they were the team in the Super Bowl. Look at the Eagles are doing. But obviously they won the Super Bowl. They have to make the unfortunate decision to kind of let guys go. And there's teams that didn't have to let guys go, that let good players go. And the Chiefs are over here keeping those big-time players. They really wanted Trey Smith and Nick Bolton back. Boom, they got him back. They got Hollywood Brown back. He didn't really get a fair go. We know it was a good fit. Got injured. He looked pretty decent even when not playing 100%. Got Kareem Hunt back. So given that, you think, okay, they actually did that. So now they have to stay quiet. I mean, Jalen Moore, I know it's to be determined on him, but $15 million per year for a guy that's going to start at left tackle, I think that's worth a shot. 2 year. Looked pretty decent when he actually had to play. You get a decent corner in Fulton, who kind of revived his career last year. I mean, a pretty decent backup. That's a pretty good backup. Gardner Minshew not going to play for them. Some idiot team's probably going to sign Minshew in the future because he learned from Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs are going to get a compensatory pick out of that. Jerry Tillery's not the best player in the world. He made some plays for the Vikings last year. Elijah Mitchell is a good pairing with Kareem Hunt. Physical back as long as he's healthy. I think given the Chiefs' circumstances, I think they did a pretty decent job. The more I talk about it, I'm almost bumping it up to a B. It's just a risky one with more. Fulton a little risky as well. And they did a good job bringing their guys back and some. I know, unfortunate decision, have to move on from Tooney. That was a trade. So kind of a B-B range for the Kansas City Chiefs here. Despite only having 2 notable moves, I still give the Ravens a B. It's not how everyone grades. Some people, I think it's stupid. People will grade just how many guys or how many good guys did you add. If the team was quiet, they get an F. I think it's stupid. The Ravens are a very good team because they have a lot of talented players that they're paying. They don't have a lot of cap space. That's just how it is. They just can't make a lot of moves going into free agency. So they start off by getting Ronnie Stanley back for a really solid deal. I thought he was going to get more than that, especially given how the tackles were going in free agency afterwards. It just kind of was more evident that the Ravens got a really good deal and they needed to keep their left tackle. They didn't want to open that hole up. And they signed DeAndre Hopkins. I definitely think he's declining. He started dropping the ball a little bit, disappearing a little bit for the Chiefs. But the Ravens play 2 receivers out there a lot. Their third receiver be a rotation. That's going to be Hopkins. I think that's perfect for him and a veteran team, a good team. They got him really cheap. This is actually what I had the Ravens doing. I had them getting Stanley and Hopkins. I didn't expect them to get much more. So I think given that they got these guys on good deals and they weren't a team that couldn't afford to spend more. They couldn't do that. They have a really good roster as it is. They'll go try to knock the draft out of the park after doing this. That's exactly what they needed to do. So not super sexy. We give them a B. This is what they had to do. They got some good deals with these guys. Packers, not a long list at all of notable additions. I kind of like the fits. I kind of like what they're doing. They spent a little bit of money, but they needed to do that. Aaron Banks, again, they spent a lot on him, but it was either that or, because they're shuffling guys around. They have a lot of versatile guys in their offensive line, so they're going to plug them at left guard. They're going to move some other guys around. They have guys that can, their draft pick from last year. Jordan Morgan could play any spot in the offensive line, so that's great. Elgin Jenkins could play any spot on the offensive line. So instead of going out and overpaying at center, not a position you want to overpay for, you go, and you pay a little bit of a premium to get a guard. And specifically, Banks has work to do as a pass protector, but I thought he was a really good run blocker. Packers are always fine pass protecting. They do a really good job coaching. Run blocking, oddly enough, I thought took a step down last year. There was so many moments, I said it like 2 years ago, where Aaron Jones had wide open holes, and last year Josh Jacobs is getting met in the backfield and having to be still going off. So I think Banks helps them in that category. And they needed a corner, and I specifically like the versatility of Hobbs specifically for that defense. I think we'll see him playing outside and inside. They only paid $12 million. I'm not a big fan of going out, even if it's a top corner. If I was a GM, I'm not paying $20 million for a corner, even though those guys are super, super good. I'm more in the market of paying at the $12 to $15 million per year range, and then paying a lot at the more important spots, offensive line, edge. Perfect world. Yeah, the Packers still need an answer at like a number one receiver and maybe a number one pass rusher, even though they got some guys there. But they check some boxes here with this one. I like the fit, and it kind of is able them to kind of do more with both these guys. It enables them to shuffle guys around the offensive line, make the run blocking better. With Hobbs, again, he can play multiple spots. It's one that's kind of growing on me, even though it's a small list of guys here. Cardinals get a B. They're pretty close to being a B+. I like Josh Sweat. Good fit under Jonathan Gannon. They badly needed an edge rusher. Got him in on somewhat of a decent deal. They also had Dalvin Tomlinson, who was cut by the Browns. So, hey, they checked some boxes. Edge and interior defensive line. They really tried to focus more on the offense line and receiver. They could not get that done. They're still looking to add a corner. Could they bring Asante Samuel Jr. in? That could boost them up. They're very close to being a B+. I just think they still have a lot to do compared to what they wanted to do. So, offensive line, they didn't do anything to the offensive line, really. So, and receiver, they did absolutely nothing to that. So that could have got him a B+ or an A- somewhere around there. But overall, I like them bringing in Josh Sweat. That could have been one of the better overall signings of free agency. That's kind of holding them up a bit, even though Dalvin Tomlinson's a pretty decent pickup. I know he was much, much better like 3-4 years ago than where he is now in his career. But I guess they checked some boxes. Wish they would have checked a little bit more. They had the ability to do that. Looking at their financial status now in the future, they got a lot of space. But overall, pretty decent for the Arizona Cardinals. Panthers get a B+. Yeah, I guess they kind of struck out on a guy like Milton Williams. They struck out on some guys, but I think they did a pretty decent job. Trevon Moehrig's a big to be determined one, because he did not play that great at free safety for the Raiders, and last year they moved him to strong, played in the box a bit more, and that's where he played at TCU. People, like the draft analysts, were talking like he was a free safety. If you actually freaking watched, I was saying this when coming out, he was a slot box player that also maybe could play in the back end at times. So it depends on where they use him a lot. I do like, I'm not saying never use him at free safety, but make sure you use him right here. He's a guy with he's a very young guy with a lot of upside. Deshaun Wharton is a guy that kind of grew on me a little bit. They needed a defensive tackle. He has had one good year was with the Chiefs, so can he do that? I think can he do it again or get better? I think he can do it with Derek Brown. They're getting Derek Brown back. I like Rico Dowdle. I mean, he looked like a legit running back, took a major step up second half of the year. Pair him with Hubbard. Hubbard will still be the running back one, the RB1 there. Patrick Jones is pretty sneaky. The downside is they need bigger and better at edge, but Patrick Jones, pretty productive, still young. Get him in there. Bobby Brown, that was kind of their solution to stop the run. I think they maybe could have done better there, but pretty decent. They got some guys that are going to help them at the end of the day. I don't know if they really overpaid anywhere. They paid a lot, but was it technically an overpay? You could argue it, I suppose, but I think they filled some needs, did what they needed to do here. Definitely got better. I like some of the moves, so I'll give the Panthers a B+. Giants also get a B+, big time signing with a couple of guys in the secondary, but mainly Javon Holland. I thought he'd get paid more than that. Really good safety. Love the pairing with Tyler Nubin. I think pretty interchangeable. You see a lot of split coverage, split safety looks with those guys, but pretty interchangeable where you can put Holland in the back, Nubin up front, Nubin in the back, Holland, doing his thing and getting in the backfield, blitzing. So I like the pairing there. I think he's gonna be a really good football player. Going forward, Paulson Adebo has a bright future. They paid him a little bit of money, but his best football is ahead of him. Very young compared to the rest of the corners, so that was kind of the difference there. Chauncey Golston, I thought there was a steal on him. That's a sneaky good addition. Bringing Roy Robertson-Harris, Darius Slayton they brought back. Offensive line, they were trying to do a little bit more there. Were they trying to get better from Slayton? That's a question. So there are some questions still where they could have got better, but love what they did with the secondary. Some sneaky additions here. They didn't spend a crazy amount of money here, in my opinion. So I think they did a pretty decent job, and they get a B+. Patriots get a B+, and they get the top free agent, Milton Williams. They had to pay a little bit. Carlton Davis had to pay a little bit. Harold Landry maybe had to pay a little bit more than you. Same with Spillane, all these guys, but they do get that defense might be nasty. Mike Vrabel defense here, it might be absolutely nasty with the players they've added. Add Morgan Moses for right tackle. Mac Hollins was the answer so far for receiver. Yeah, they kind of did miss on building the offense line. I mean, Cam Robinson, I love them. He's still out there. That could help a lot too. They spent a little bit. With the amount of money you spent, you kind of wish they did something a little more with the receiver position, the offensive line. That's kind of the only knock. They spent a little bit on some of these players, but sometimes you got to do that. So they do get better at the same time. But yeah, given that they kind of spent as much as some of the other teams that got like more like the Vikings we're talking about, they got like these big time, maybe they didn't get Milton Williams, but they got some big time players. So you think with the amount that the Patriots spent, you maybe think they would have checked a little bit more boxes is basically my point. But that defense should be nasty. Still wondering about what's around Drake May, though. That's what you worry about a little bit. So I felt like a B+ was pretty fitting for the Patriots. The Lions are another team where it's not a long list of things, but I liked what they did. I mean, DJ Reed was one of the best single signings of the offseason. In terms of additions, like new signings, that was number one. Getting the top corner in free agency at that price, a guy that's familiar with zone and man plays, great in both, so it kind of gives you a little bit more freedom to run more zone, which the Lions need to do. I mean, Carlton Davis is great. They save money by moving on from him, a guy with durability concerns, to get a guy that I think is better than DJ Reed, maybe a little bit better. It's fantastic. Roy Lopez is a sneaky addition. The Lions are all about stopping the run. Lopez is really good stopping the run. And when the Lions got beat up in the interior defense line, they couldn't do what they did best, stopping the run. So they're making sure they got the guys. And then I thought Onwuzurike was going to leave and get more money. The Lions get him back on a steal of a deal. I think that's awesome for them. You have to factor in. Some people might go, the Lions actually had some spending money this year, and they didn't do a lot. Should we fault them for that? If you look, future money, they do not have. They're very low in the NFL in future money. So they do want some of that money to roll over. So they couldn't go in, again, multi-year deals. It's not about cap space this year. It's about long-term cap space. So they actually did not have as much room to work with as people think. I think they did a fantastic job given that, and they still have ability to make some more moves. And they didn't really need to make a bunch of moves because they already have a really, really good roster if it's healthy. So starting with DJ Reed, one of the best signings of free agency, the best new addition of free agency in my opinion, given contract and the player. I thought they did an outstanding job. Buccaneers get an A- for me, and if you're looking at the notable additions, it doesn't look overly that crazy, but it's a team that did not have a lot of spending money. They absolutely had to get Godwin back because he had the way his contract was structured. They was going to have a dead cap hit even with him off the roster, and they would actually be able to move that money around. So they needed to get him back, and Godwin had the leverage because of that, and they got him on the steal of the offseason, $22 million per year. I mean, just an absolute steal to get their guy back. I mean, so that is the best single signing of the offseason. And they get Reddick back, and Reddick's a little risky because is he the same player? Because he barely played last year, but didn't look that great. But I mean, a couple years ago, he was elite, borderline elite. So what do you pay him? So at first it was like $14 million for 1 year. Maybe a little risky, but you start to see these other contracts come out. It's like, all right, that looks a lot better. And I pegged him as a fit with the Bucs. I think it's a perfect fit. I think he's going to play well. They badly need an edge rusher. So add Anthony Walker, need a learned linebacker. And they got some of their own guys back, which, Levante David's a pretty big name, but not super big names. Bredesen starts for them at left guard. Gaines really helped. I mean, they really value stopping the run. I do too as well. He's part of that. So I think they did a pretty good job. It's hard to put them higher than A- because they didn't do a ton. I'm close to having him in an A because Godwin contract was so good, and they didn't have a ton of spending money. Just had to bring him back. So they're like A- A range. I thought this was a really good job from Tampa given the circumstance, given the scenario that they were in. The Chicago Bears are also going to get an A- or in that A- range, I suppose. A lot of theirs is built off of trades, which is his free agency grades. You do have to factor that in a little bit, though, because they added the guards, and then they plugged the free agency signing Dahlman in between them, and it kind of made a collection. It kind of grew the offense line. So I thought they did a good job there. Signing a center isn't, again, the most appealing thing in the world, but they get a pretty solid one as long as he's healthy in there. And then Grady Jarrett, I'm pretty optimistic with him. I know people are saying he's declining, and he has a 3-year deal, and it's I guess it's kind of wait and see, was it worth it or not? But I think, to me, he's still making more of an impact in the stats show. He'll take on double teams. He'll disrupt plays. Just won't tally up the big sack numbers. Doesn't really need to. So add him into that mix. I think he kind of can revive his career here, but we'll kind of wait and see. And then Dayo Odeyingbo, maybe a little bit higher than expected when it comes to him. I don't love the contract structure for him, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's an upside pass rusher that really fits what Dennis Allen's looking for, the physical traits, but maybe that's not one you love. And then Zaccheaus is he had his best year of his career probably last year, slot receiver. The only downside with this, I know Bears fans either wanted Keenan Allen back or they wanted to kind of upgrade at that other slot receiver spot. And so Zaccheaus is a slot receiver. So that kind of tells you no Keenan Allen, and that's kind of their trio. But at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty decent slot receiver. So, I mean, there's some notable names here, maybe not the most appealing list. It's not like star free agents. But overall, I like what they did. And I am kind of factoring the trades a little bit, even though they're not free agency, because the trenches, it all kind of played a part here. But I know some fans where they wanted Trey Smith, and when he was gone, they wanted Will Fries, and they wanted Sweat or trade for Trey Hendrickson, and they didn't really do that. To me, those fans are disappointed with this, but I don't think it was going out there and getting the best, most expensive players. Well, Dahlman was the highest paid center of free agency, second highest paid overall, but it wasn't really about that. They didn't end up, to me, spending too much. You don't want to do that when you're a young team led by a young quarterback. Either they're right there, or they kind of need it to be a little bit. And again, some risk here. Odeyingbo, you're banking on upside. Jarrett, you're banking on him not declining, 3-year deal. Dahlman, you're banking on him being a top-tier center in football. So maybe a little risk, but I don't mind it here. Give the Bears an A-. How about the Indianapolis Colts actually making splash moves in free agency? For so long, they insisted on just focusing on their own, staying the same. And what happened to the Colts over the last several years? They frickin' stayed the same. They were the same for the most part. They had like one really, really bad year maybe. They're pretty much that same team. They're not a bad team. They're not that much of a good team. They're in the middle of the pack. Maybe the worst spot to be. And now they go out and they do some damage finally. Charvarius Ward was my number 2 corner in the class. They go out and get him. Perfect pairing for Lou Anarumo's defense. He's really good in man, but can play zone as well. The Colts have been stuck running as much cover 3 as anyone. They're out of that. They're able to mix it up now. They had Cam Bynum, one of the top free safeties in free agency. This guy has upside, too, because he was a corner turned safety coming out of college, and he's coming off his rookie contract. Big-time playmaker. Brings a level of energy to a defense, too. He's the mastermind behind all the celebrations. It's a small thing. It's a bonus. I like that energy on my defense, right? Daniel Jones. I know people knock Daniel Jones. Everybody's played awful for the Giants. I mean, there's guys that look like they're not capable of playing football when they go play for the Giants. They leave the Giants. Even great players leave the Giants. They're on a whole other planet. Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney. I think it's a great fit. Daniel Jones, Shane Steichen offense, with his legs, the weapons they have. They did lose some offensive linemen, but I don't know. They're pretty good at developing and coaching in the offensive line. That's the only knock there. Khalil Herbert, a small one. Anthony Richardson, you can't go all in on him. I think Jones starts. I mean, they were really bad as a secondary. They got a lot better there. I like what the Colts did. Nobody talking about it right now. They could win the AFC South. They very much. I will see what my prediction is. I don't think the Titans are going to be at the bottom still. They're a work in progress. The other 2 teams are pretty solid. Colts can do it. I think they can do that. And it's been a long time since I said that. So they could do it. I like, offensive line's a little bit of a question, but they know how to replace the guys. They know how to develop the guys. So funny, what happens when you actually do something in free agency, you become a better team. So Ballard's been just too stubborn for so long. I'm surprised he still has his job, but he finally went at it here. I think adding Lou Anarumo was pretty big for them as well. The Bengals wouldn't supply him with a big-time corner. He came in here, and he got supplied with a big-time corner, Charvarius Ward. So it's awesome for where Indianapolis is heading. The Minnesota Vikings went crazy this offseason. That's all you hear and everyone say right now. The Vikings are loaded. That roster is loaded. It's weird hearing the Vikings and loaded next to each other. So they really did some damage this offseason. It's risky because the amount of money they spent. But a couple things that I love with the Vikings, not that besides the fact that they just got better. There's more to it than that. But you look at the free agency class. It was considered a weaker free agency class, and I was scared for teams to spend a lot when it's some of the top free agents. But overspending when it comes to the part of the free agency class that made it a weaker free agency class. The Vikings did not do that. They went and got the top guys. Definitely the best guys. A lot of upside here. There's a lot of proven veterans here. A mixture of all that. And that defensive line on paper might look like the best in football right now. It's pretty ridiculous because they kept those guys together and added more. The interior offense lines, what kind of held them short at the end, looking at the Lions game and the Rams game. Boom, they add the top guard available since Trey Smith got taken off the board. And I actually thought after Banks got his deal that Fries was going to get more. They had Ryan Kelly. I thought it was Colts to retire for him, so I didn't think that was a possibility. So the Vikings really upgrade in the interior as well. Another big thing, again, the free agency class was kind of known as a little weaker, even though it was a little top heavy and the Vikings got some of those top guys. But out of the pool of free agents that got cut, it was actually considered very strong. And the Vikings went and got a couple of those guys as well. And why that is big is does not affect the compensatory formula. So the Vikings projection right now, projected on track to actually, once again, like Cousins this year, get the top third-round pick, compensatory pick, for losing Sam Darnold because those didn't cancel out because they were signings off of cuts. So it was a very strategic and successful free agency for Minnesota. Risky because they spent a lot, but it's one of those ones where it makes a lot of sense because they already had a really good roster and it feels like they're loaded. They just have a question at quarterback right now. They need a veteran quarterback. And on top of that, they're able to re-sign some of their guys, mainly Byron Murphy. You would think they'd do all this and re-sign that guy. You'd think it was impossible. And they actually are still pretty good financially. So they had some strategic plan there. One of the bigger winners of free agency, Minnesota, whose roster looking pretty nasty right now. It's just quarterback is somewhat of a question. Even if you believe in McCarthy, it's still a question. We don't know yet. So, interesting team to say the least. Short and sweet for the Rams. I loved what the LA Rams did. And actually, we could circle back to before free agency, them signing Alaric Jackson. This is big, and it's bigger now more than ever. They signed him for like a $19 million max value deal. And I was like, that's a little bit for a tackle, but he's a good young one that's getting experience. He's the guy of the future for them. And then you get to free agency, and you see what these tackles are getting paid. And it's like, oh my God, if he made it to free agency, the Rams would have had to pay 22, 23, hell, $24 million per year to get him. So, man, that looks good now. They didn't need to open up a new hole on the offense line. They did not need that. Davante Adams, I mean, he showed. Took him a little bit, couple weeks when he got in there, but then he showed he still got it. He was making some unreal plays, playing at an unreal level for the Jets, and the Jets are dysfunctional at the end of the year. Perfect pairing with Puka Nacua. Two guys that can play outside and inside, could do either. I think you actually see Nacua in the slot a little bit more than you used to because Davante Adams play a little bit more outside. I love the pairing. Perfect. It's a 2-year contract at the price that he got. I think it's perfect all around. Perfect to pair at Matt Stafford. Last couple years to give it a go here. Try to win something else. Poona Ford is a sneaky good deal. I mean, that guy was awesome for the Chargers last year, revived his career. He stops the run very well. He gets in the backfield. They got him at a good price. That's one of those sneaky signings that I didn't expect to like a Poona Ford signing from anybody, but once it happened, I'm like, man, I love that fit. The Rams need to stop the run a lot better. That helps them a lot. I love what the Rams did here. They actually got better while not doing a whole lot, not overspending. That is how you do it in my book. Love it. One of the biggest winners of free agency. And that'll do it for this one. I feel like I'm losing my voice talking for so long. A lot of work went in this one, breaking down all the free agency classes. I'm sure we'll have complainers in the comments that their team didn't get an A+, and that I'm a hater, but I love football. I don't hate anybody. So the grades are what they are. The teams decided them, not me. So there you have it. Next up, updated mock draft post free agency will be very interesting after some needs were filled. But that'll do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.